It was only natural that Toni Lamond and later her son, Tony Sheldon, would go into the family business. Indeed, it's hard to imagine the Australian musical theatre without them. They've also enjoyed success overseas, and Tony Sheldon will soon be making his Broadway debut. I guess you'd both agree there is no business like show business.
There isn't. It was written for us, definitely. I think Berlin didn't know us, but he wrote it for us.
Did you ever regret your decision to go into show business? Is there anything else that secretly you think you might have liked to have done?
I toyed with the idea of becoming a hire car driver when I was a little boy, but then I never got my licence, so that sort of went by the wayside. No, it was always, it surrounded me as a child. It was all anybody talked about. The music we heard was theatre music. Everybody worked in television, so we were constantly looking at television from a professional point of view. You never just sat back and enjoyed a show. It was always, oh, what camera angle was that? You know, there was no escaping.
But it was the same for you too, Tony.
I never thought of doing anything else. I really didn't. But it was later in life that I realised that I could do something else, like write. And now I'm pursuing those things. But no, it's the reason I breathe.
So your parents were both in vaudeville?
My mother and father, Stella Lamond, was a straight woman. That's the woman who, with a comedian, she would feed him the straight lines so that he could give her the comedy punchline. And she was the best timer in the business. And she was also a terrific singer, and Sophie Tucker was her role model. And my father, Joe Lawman, was a baggy pants comic. In fact, when Stiffy and Mo, Roy Reen and Nat Phillips broke up their act, Stiffy worked with my father, Stiffy and Joe. So he was a pantomime dame. And so, yeah, it was the family business.
And a good comedian. And were you close to him? And I ask because you're a good comic yourself, aren't you?
I get that from Stella, I think. Stella and Joe divorced. They were always, it was the Depression, so they had to, go where the work was. So they'd either be in New Zealand or Wagga or northern Queensland, and I was with a nanny in Campsie in Sydney, and then they divorced. And so the only time I ever saw them was if they came to town and did a show at Campsie or somewhere. So when Stella found another comic to marry, Max Reddy, and they got a regular gig in Melbourne radio, that's when I went over at age 7 and had something approaching a regular life.
I'll ask you about the Reddy side of the family a bit later. But you both made your debut as children. I think you were 10?
I was 10.
And you were...
I was 7.
You were 7. Goodness me.
Yes, I was on the in Melbourne Tonight shows, the Graham Kennedy shows, which my father, who started out as a dancer, Frank Sheldon, by then he was the producer of the Graham Kennedy shows. So I enjoyed the family business then. Because
you were working on the Graham Kennedy shows, Tony.
Yes. Well, actually, Frank Sheldon and I, with our song and dance act, opened GTV9 Melbourne. Television had started the previous year with the Olympic Games, but that was all outside broadcast, and they would come back to the studio and whoever was doing the news in a little room, and it was, I think, up in the mountains in Melbourne, up in the Dandenongs, and they'd do the epilogue. Remember when they used to close television with the epilogue? And then they'd say goodnight, and it would go off air about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. But the following year they had a studio. They bought an old piano factory and converted it. And the official opening night, the governor, Sir Dallas Brooks, opened it. And then they had a variety show compared by Terry Deer. And he said, all right, on with the show. Here's Toni Lamond and Frank Sheldon. And we were the first act to open GTV9, and it wasn't till about 40 years later I discovered I was the first woman on Victorian television, because it had been a boys' club up to then, all those guys doing the news and the epilogue. Yes.
You stormed the barricades.
I stormed. That's an Aries, you see. I'm an Aries.
So when you made your debut on the Graham Kennedy Show, what did you sing?
I sang "Swinging on a Star" as a duet with Graham, and I sang a song called "I Love a Comedian," which was from an English review that Mum and Dad knew of, and there was quite a response because there were no children on primetime television. There was Swallows Juniors at 5 o'clock and a lot of daytime kids shows, but there weren't any children in the adult time slots. And so there was quite a bit of mail as a result of it. And I remember waking up one morning and there were 3 record albums of Disney, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan or something, and they were from Mr. Bednall, the head of Channel 9. And there was a note saying, "We hope you will come and join our family." And I was invited to become part of the team in Melbourne Tonight. And so every fortnight on a Wednesday for a couple of years, I'd go in and I'd sing and dance and do comedy sketches, and that was my training.
He did a duet with Diana Trask, which I'm running down for her. She's coming back to visit in January, and I said, I'm going to give you the film of that. Yes, he did. She was waiting to see an agent.
Diana Trask, of course, was a very popular entertainer at that time.
That's right. She was very big and got bigger, of course, in America, but she was just coming to prominence. And this little tiny tot dressed in a suit and hat was out telling her not to be frightened, have courage, and did a duet with her. Frank wrote it, of course.
I thought Graham Kennedy didn't like children.
He didn't like children, but he came and stayed with us one weekend, and apparently unbidden I served him breakfast in bed with a little rose on the tray and said, "Mr. Kennedy, if there's anything I could get you." And after that he couldn't have been nicer to me. So obviously I knew how to network even at that tender age.
At age
7.
9?
No, 7.
Were you 7 or 8?
I was retired when I was 9.
Yeah,
Yes,
your parents put it into it.
They did.
Why?
Oh, I started getting a bit up myself by the time I was 9. I started to... I just talked back a bit, and I know why. It was because I wasn't happy there. It was... the kids at school gave me a shocking time. That, "Oh, you think you're a star, your parents are rich." Well, none of that was true. And I didn't understand why I was getting all this hostility. So I think I wanted it to come to an end. And so I just started to act up. And one night I did something that my dad asked me not to do on camera, and I came off camera and my dad was standing there. He went, "That was your last appearance on television."
Oh.
I will never forget the moment. It was as if it was yesterday. And I was forcibly retired at the age of 9.
And were you sent to boarding school?
Yes, I was already at that school, but it was hard because Mum and Dad were working 5 nights a week at Channel 9, and there was no way for Mum to get home, and we were living at that point a fair way away from the studio. Mum couldn't get home to cook me meals, nobody could pick me up from school, and it was just a difficult time for everybody. So
he came home on the weekends. He was like a weekly boarder.
Yeah.
So it was just decided that was the best thing.
So when you were at school, did you envisage your life turning out the way that it has?
I had no plan. I didn't know what was to become of me. I really didn't. For a start, I didn't understand why I was suddenly in this boarding school, because it was like, oh, I thought we were all in show business. And suddenly, I was being made to play football and learn science. So that threw a curve. But then Mum got Oliver in 1966, and I was allowed to audition for that, and so suddenly I was back on the boards, and from then on I thought, yes, this is what I want to do with my life. Yeah.
Now, Oliver, what part did you play?
I was number 4 boy in the blue group, because there was a red group and a blue group, and we all had numbers in order of height, and I had one line: "Books you ordered from the bookseller, sir." And I was like one of those people in the movies.
I remember that line.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I loved Oliver.
There you see.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was too young to play the Artful Dodger, and I didn't sing well enough to play Oliver. But I got in the chorus, and I had a lovely time. I loved being in the chorus. It was great.
So when you were in Oliver, did you envisage that one day you'd be on the West End and soon making your debut on Broadway?
I didn't really think outside of the square because I was seeing people like, well, apart from the fact my mother was the leading lady and I had seen her be a leading lady in a lot of musicals, people like Jill Perryman was suddenly starring in Funny Girl and Nancy Hayes was doing Sweet Charity. So there was a very healthy musical theatre industry here and I was a part of it. I was allowed to go and sit in rehearsals and I knew these people socially. This was where I wanted to be and I wanted to be contributing to this industry.
And indeed you have, and we'll cover that as we go along, but let's just talk about Priscilla for the moment, Priscilla the Musical, which is the show that's going to take you to New York. And you've performed the role both in Australia and on the West End.
And New Zealand.
And I ran into your mother when you'd just been nominated for an Olivier Award for a Best Actor in a Musical, and you were beside yourself.
My favourite position.
She'd called, waited to go through to the UK to find out if you'd won and all those sorts of things. What is it about Priscilla that has made it such a I mean, it is really now becoming an evergreen almost.
It is. It's becoming its own little industry.
Yeah.
It's that old cliche, the feel-good show. It preaches that you can make a family out of if you are rejected, if you're different, there is always a place for you in the world. There are others like you, and it preaches tolerance. The characters all find love. They find children who they thought might be ashamed of them. They find that children are accepting. It's about acceptance and love. It spreads a very generous message, and it also says feel free to dress up, to be yourself, be unusual, don't conform. So people love that idea, and the show's extremely popular with women. Women love coming in groups, and I think they feel that they can get away from their ordinary lives and just be silly.
How many times have you seen it, Tony?
9.
9?
That's counting London. Well, mainly people would come from overseas and I'd take them to it. And I saw it in Sydney and I saw it in Melbourne. I was following, there were rewrites going on, and that interested me. I wanted to see the show grow because I saw stuff being left out, and then they were building parts of I can't think of any of the characters.
The characters, they were changing
the father, the Jeremy's part. They were building it, and that interested me as a writer. So yes, I've only ever seen in every other show of Tony's. I've never seen them more than twice, if it was twice. But this one grabbed me. It is a feel-good show. You do come away feeling,
Yeah, you do. It's a happy show. But now in Priscilla, you play Bernadette, a transsexual who finds love.
Yes.
But you didn't want to do this role when it was first offered to you. You turned it down.
Well, I'd just done the producers for nearly 2 years, and I was in a dress for 20 minutes of the show, and it was all anybody talked about. And I heard there's this role of this transsexual, and I thought, I don't want to go and be in a dress again, because people's memories are very short, and people only remember you for the last job you did. But it was just a workshop. It was a 10-day workshop for Priscilla. And so I went along, and there were no costumes, and I had a beard, and it was midsummer, and I was in shorts and running shoes with a beard playing this role, and I could see in people's eyes that they were believing that I was a woman. And I thought, it's not a drag role. It's not a guy in a frock. It's a woman. I've not attempted this before. And so that became the challenge. If I can get this one right, I've really accomplished something. And then the producers stuck by me. They did look for a bigger star, I will give them that. They looked all over the world, but then they committed to me for the Australian production, and then they stuck by me for England, and now they've stuck by me for Broadway. And I owe it all to them, to Simon Phillips, our director, and to the entire production staff and our producers. Their faith in me, I can't believe my luck.
I think John Frost, the producer, had a lot of faith in you.
John is one of the early producers,
Yeah.
yes. The Back Row Productions are the primary producers, but John pushed me to do the producers. I didn't want to audition for that either. And
Reluctant star.
reluctance is my middle name, Ita. I'm one of those people who, I suppose it's the director in me. If somebody asks me to play a part, I go, oh, I know someone who's much better than me, and I'll suggest another name. I have to be talked into pretty much everything. I always say no first, and then I think, oh, all right, yeah, I'll do it.
And when does Priscilla open on Broadway?
It opens in March of 2011. We're playing Toronto first for 4 months.
This year.
This year, and then March of 2011 we open in New York.
And I take it you'll be at the opening night, Tony.
Not at Toronto, I won't.
No, I mean Broadway.
That's too much. It's too cold in Canada.
No, I mean Broadway.
Broadway, yes. I did, God willing, and the creeks don't rise, I'll be there.
Did you always go to your mother's opening nights?
Yes, I mean, I don't like opening nights as such because I'm very shy and I get very intimidated having to talk to people in a foyer. I get struck dumb. I just can't do it. So I prefer to sneak into the matinee the next day. But yes, poor Mum will tell you that I'll go back and say, that was wonderful. I have 20 pages of notes. I remember the last performance of Gypsy, which my mother had played for a year. I went to the last matinee and I was smoking then and I'd written notes on my cigarette packet.
Oh,
and my
lovely.
mother said, I have one performance left, Tony. I said, it could be better. So, yes, I'm her harshest
Poor
critic.
woman.
Yes.
Well, let's look at some
But
of
who was it that was it Noel Coward for that three-hander that they right up to the last night they were trying, they said that got a laugh.
Yes,
That-
Lunton Fontaine.
Lunton Fontaine,
Yes.
yes. So we are inspired
We're
by the greats.
perfectionists,
Yes.
yes.
Well, let's talk about some of your shows. Pajama Game, Gypsy,
Oliver, Anything
Annie Get Your
Goes,
Gun.
Annie Get Your Gun, Oliver, and then I went overseas and was lucky to do some shows that I didn't get here. Annie, Nonsense.
Were you Miss Hannigan?
Pardon?
Miss Anne Hannigan? Were you
I was understudying Miss Hannigan in Los Angeles and got on to play the part.
in Annie?
Yes. The woman who played it said Jane Cannell, who had been the original
Agnes Gooch.
Agnes Gooch in
in the
Maid.
film.
In Maid.
And she said, let me warn you, I don't go off. I said, great. Was I going to be an understudy? I'd gone overseas. I'd never been an understudy in Australia. And I said, am I going to be an understudy? And I thought, Shirley MacLaine started as an understudy. She got on in Pajama Game and look what happened with her. All right, I'll do it. Well, Jane didn't go off for the longest time. And then finally she went off when she got a television show in Hollywood, because we were playing in Hollywood, and it was a Wednesday matinee, and of course no agents came out to see me. I told all the casting directors, nobody came to see me, so there went that. But hey, it was 14 months' work. So
Fantastic.
And then I did a lot. I did a lot of summer stock. I did The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I got to play Hello Dolly twice. Then 42nd Street. I did four companies of 42nd Street before I came out and played the Australian and New Zealand production. And then I did Pirates of Penzance, which I got a whole new generation of 4-year-old fans with that.
I
who
bet you did.
Dance to what they call a paradox. We found out a little girl was calling it a parrot box. So a whole new in the 90s, and then Walt Disney's
Beauty and the Beast.
what was that show? Beauty
and
the
the
Beast.
I think
We
the
forget
show I
that one.
always identify with you is Oliver. I think when you played
Oh, that's
Nancy,
wonderful.
you were just such a perfect Nancy. And when you sang as long as he needs me. I do remember sort of going, oh, it was just beautiful.
Well, I'd seen the original London production and years before, and I wanted to do it, and I didn't get it. Sheila Bradley got it when they and Johnny Lockwood did it, but then they revived it in 1966. And I got it then, and I'd always remembered Georgia Brown, and I modelled my performance after Georgia Brown because I thought she was wonderful in the West End of London. So evidently I hit the
coincided with a tough time in both your lives.
Oh, boy.
When your husband, your dad, Frank Sheldon, took his own life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for both of you, except awful.
It changed everything.
Yes.
We were on the train from Sydney to Melbourne. I think it was still the Spirit of Progress. And the police stopped the train at Goulburn in the middle of the night and got on and told us that my husband and his father was dead. He was 11. And we just held each other the rest of the night. And then the next morning we pulled into the Melbourne train station, and it's the first time I'd seen so much press in my life. I'd never seen so much press altogether because it was front page news, because Frank Sheldon by that time was Graham Kennedy's producer. So he was very high on the list in television. When he went, it took three guys to replace him. And and then I had to go on to Adelaide and perform it and sing As Long As He Needs Me.
And I think as a result of all this and having to cope and the grief, you became addicted to prescription drugs?
I got migraine headaches the night of the funeral. I got a migraine headache and the doctor came and gave me a pethidine injection. And this was 1966. They didn't find out till the Vietnam War how quickly addictive pethidine was. When they would go into the jungle and get the soldiers and put them on the helicopters, and they'd give them a pethidine injection, and then 4 hours later they'd give them a pethidine, and it was 48 hours to become hooked.
Gosh.
And this was 1966, that was before that happened, and I got it and was starting. At the end of it, I was starting to get the migraine headaches in order to get the pethidine injection. And then it was, sleeping pills and anything I could get my hand on.
How did you quit?
It wasn't street drugs. It was prescription. I wasn't a drug addict. But then, of course, I fainted on stage and tried to kill myself and did all that, and then some friends did what's called an intervention and got me to commit myself into a psychiatric hospital that's no longer there, and more's the pity, in Melbourne, called Larundel. And it was an experimental ward that was a few years later taken up by the Betty Ford Clinic, and it's where you're not allowed to be in bed and be treated. You've got to get up, you've got to do menial work, and then do group therapy. I sat like this in group therapy for the first few weeks. Who are these people? I don't have these people's problems. What's this? Until one day somebody said something and I said, well, it's perfectly clear to me you could... And I started to... But it was weeks. And, they knew who I was and the shame of it, But then I started to go forward. It was every year I ring up Dr. Garland and at the beginning of the year and thank him for my life. Because I christened him Judy. Judy Garland was my... and he's become my friend.
And Tony, you became depressed, and I think much later you gave up alcohol and cigarettes?
Well, I only gave up alcohol and cigarettes like within the last 10 years. So for a major part of my life, yes, I've not had a good time at all. But see, all this was happening in my teenage years, of course. And, so I was a stroppy teenager in myself and stuck in boarding school and not enjoying that and then trying to carve my own career and at the same time seeing my mother falling apart, basically, around me. So it was all very traumatic. But that whole period did leave lasting scars, I think, yeah.
But you guys have overcome it, haven't you?
Well, yes,
That's the way you are, isn't it?
Well, yeah, excuse me, certainly our relationship didn't suffer for very long at all. That was something that we mended very quickly. But it's then finding your own inner strength, just getting yourself right. That's what I've had to be working on. And
See, he wouldn't go to therapy. No, I don't. No, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. See, so he did it all on his own.
And it was something I read about Paul Mercurio, who said that he'd come out of depression, and he just said, I gave myself permission to be happy. And that resonated. I thought, that's what it is. I have spent so long thinking, this is my lot. It's all going to be dreadful. I'm always going to be unhappy. And but it was all about self-esteem as well. I've always had terrible weight problems, and it was just considering that I was unattractive and people didn't want to hire me, and it was all of that. You just tell yourself you're worthless all the time, and it just took me a long time to get out of that cycle.
Well, you've got out of it now.
Yes, I have. I have.
and life is good. I mean, you're both very versatile performers. I mean, if we look at you, Tony, you've done Chekhov and Shakespeare, and you've done award-winning roles in musicals and Witches of Eastwick. I can't remember all of your
He's
shows.
better than all of us.
You've written scripts for Sons and Daughters. You've written shows for David Atkins and Nancy Hayes.
Yes.
You've appeared in Homicide. I mean. And you've written your mother's fantastic show. Is there no end? And now you're going to Broadway. This is fantastic.
Well, it's you do what you can to keep out there.
Keep out there?
Yes.
How could anyone miss you? You're everywhere.
But I've not been a high-profile person. It's all been pretty much under the radar, just working quietly away in the salt mines all this time. And that's why it's suddenly for this to happen, it's like my Auntie Helen said, this is the payback for all the years of struggle when nobody knew that you were doing all this stuff.
Yes.
But, by then you paid your dues and you've built up your stamina and you can go and walk out and go, I own this role and no one's taking this away from me.
Mine.
It's mine.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Auntie Helen, because that's Helen Reddy, your half-sister, your half-sister. And I was wondering, who is going to carry on the family business after you two? I mean, does Helen have children? I mean, I know Helen has children, but are there little entertainers in there somewhere?
No, unfortunately. I've just taken on a grandmother surrogacy with a friend of mine who's in amateur theatre. So, but they're 6 and 4, so I don't know yet. It's early days yet. But no, there's the line ends here, the Sheldon line.
But Helen's daughter has a voice. So she could well.
Yes, I saw a clip of her on YouTube,
Her granddaughter has a voice. You said daughter.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
And the daughter was holding the granddaughter, and I was wondering. I thought,
well, she's 12 now. She's got a voice, and she's at a performance school in Los Angeles. Last year she played Fagin. This year she played
Velma Kelly
in Chicago.
Oh, sounds like there's another one.
The voice. Tracy didn't have the voice, Helen's daughter, but Tracy's a director. She learned to be a television director at the George Lucas television school, her daughter. And Jordan, her son, is managing her career. He's just collaborated on bringing out the book on Michael Jackson that is the new technology where you hold it up to the screen on television and on computer. The screen on computer, and it's an internet site, and it starts up, and it's all this stuff that's never been seen of
Wow.
Michael Jackson, because there is a lot they've kept back, and they've sold it in many countries. They've already sold millions of them over last Christmas, so he was in on that. He's
So
in a
the family business is in good hands by the sound of things. There is a future.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
let's go back to musicals again. Is there a role that you'd still like to do? One you wished you could have done?
I would love to, but let's get serious. I can't do that 8 performances a week for weeks on end slog anymore. I have got arthritis since Beauty and the Beast, and wore a heavy costume. I was the wardrobe, and I wore a 15-kilo costume which pulled my whole body out of whack. Dancers and athletes in later life, the arthritis has gone through from here down here. And now I can only do cabaret and stuff that's only one-offs and something.
And you've been
simple
working in
for-
the Melbourne Cabaret Theatre this year.
I've done the Noosa Cabaret. I've done the Melbourne Cabaret. I'm going back to Melbourne for the cabaret later, the festival later this year. But they're one-offs in cabaret. I'm doing masterclasses. I do a masterclass how to audition for musical theatre. I'm doing some teaching some classes at the Australian Institute of Music.
So you're
What
busy.
else?
Writing a cookbook.
I'm writing the cookbook, Cooking When You're Broke.
Oh, you haven't written that yet. I noticed it was on your website, and I thought, I
Well,
haven't heard
I'm
of that book.
revising it.
Are you revising?
TV Week, Southdown Press published it in 1975. It was a gag. Now it's for
Now
real.
it's serious.
It's serious,
Cooking
yes,
when
but
you're
it's
broke.
funny and it's serious and it's all sorts of,
What about you, Tony? Is there a musical role you'd still love to do?
Not really, because whenever you really set your sights on a role, you don't get it. Somebody else gets it. I would have loved to have done The Drowsy Chaperone, but Geoffrey Rush snaffled it out from under me while I was in London. And I would have liked to have done Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and
Oh,
Billy Brown
yeah.
snaffled that one.
Yeah.
So it's best not to to dream. My entire career, roles have come out of left field, and as I said, I've never ever thought that I was good enough to actually go after anything. So when people come to me and say, we'd like you to play this, I go, oh, all right, and then have a wonderful time doing it. I loved doing all the Sondheims. I've done a lot of Sondheim shows for the Sydney Theatre Company, and I love doing new Australian musicals as well. Yes, Mum always says they haven't written the show for you yet. So one always hopes that, well, maybe they have.
well,
but,
they just... they
but
did,
but
yes.
one always hopes
But
the
I've
next
said
big
that
one
for
is.
years.
around
Bernadette
the
is
corner.
very much your show, don't you think?
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, when I was researching you both, it occurred to me that your lives would make a fantastic musical. Have you thought
he's
about
written
that?
yes, somebody standing off and looking at our family from maybe Back for the Vaudeville. But you interviewed us, 15 years ago when he wrote Madonna and Child. We had done a cabaret show in Sydney separately. He'd done his show with Peter Tapano and Tony Taylor and
Robin
Robin.
Mose.
Right. And then I'd come in and I'd done a show. And then the guy that owned the cabaret room said, well, now Tony Lamond filled the room and Tony Sheldon filled the room. Now, if I put them together, hey, it'll overflow. So he said to Tony, would you write a show for you and your mother? And Tony said, well, I don't want to do a cabaret show. He instantly saw a theatre show. So he called me in Los Angeles and said, I want to do it in the theatre. I said, right. He said, Tony Lamond comes out to Australia after 10 years of being in Los Angeles for the first time to work with her son, and they don't get on. I said, write it. And he wrote a marvellously funny show. He called it Madonna and Child, because Mother and Son had already been taken. And it was, I've never seen such reviews. I've never been one for love letter reviews in my career. This, wasn't it, was astounding. And we got a mini tour out of it in northern Queensland. Sue Nattrass took it and squeezed us into
Sue
the
Nattrass
Melbourne...
from the Melbourne Theatre,
Victorian
Melbourne
Arts Centre,
Festival.
Victorian Arts
Yeah.
Centre,
She booked us there.
and we did the off-Broadway that no longer exists, I think, here in Sydney. And that was 15 years ago.
25 years ago.
Is it 25?
So I thought it was a bit
See,
longer
you
than
blink
50.
and you miss
yes,
it.
I thought it was a bit...
And then he wrote the one-woman show for me.
that
because
you've been doing
that,
most
well, I
recently.
did. I haven't done it for 2 years.
The Times of Our Lives.
No, Times of My Life.
Times of My Life,
Times of
sorry,
My Life.
yeah.
That I had wanted to do the autobiographical story with the film and the TV footage to illustrate it, because there was a lot by then. And I also wanted a show that I could sit down, because it was becoming very difficult to stand up for a long time. I was beginning to go paralysed in the legs. You know, a lot of arthritis sufferers will go, oh yeah, I know that one. So Tony said, all right, we'll have it that you're waiting for the taxi at home to go on tour, and it hasn't come yet, so you'll sit down in that chair and you'll tell the audience, or you'll get up and do It was perfect.
I saw it in Sydney here at the Ensemble Theatre, and
Good show,
it's
isn't
a
it?
wonderful show. I think you wrote a fantastic show.
Thank you.
What is it about the musical theatre that captures us all?
It'll never die. It's wonderful. I remember the day I first saw a musical show, because my world was vaudeville world. My parents were the Tivoli, you know.
What was the first musical show you
And I went to Her Majesty's Theatre in Melbourne, and it was during World War II. I think I was about 14 or 15. And it was Rosemarie, a revival of Rosemarie, because they were doing all revivals then, because we couldn't get new musicals from America and England, because the ships weren't bringing out mail from overseas. They were fighting a war, keeping us from being occupied. And I saw this story unfold, this lovely music, and lots more people on the stage than there had been at the Tivoli, twice as many ballet girls for a start. And I came out of there and my world changed, my life changed. And then I started going and seeing No No Nanette. And
You must have seen Gladys Moncrief, did you?
Gladys Moncrief,
The great
I toured
Australian
with.
singer. Yeah. Oh, did you?
After that, she was now an ageing lady. They were bringing young people out of the chorus and making them leads. My first show away from home, I was 19, and it was a variety show. Harry Wren was the producer. And it opened in Adelaide, and we did a New Zealand tour. It was George Wallace Sr., and I was soubrette, which was singing in front of the ballet and then stepping and doing the dance routine with them, and working with the comedian. Well, I'd watched Stella do that, so I knew, and that's when I knew that I had a career. And the other star of the show was Gladys Moncrief, in concert. And I used to come off I remember I'd be taking my hat off and I'd be to see Gladys Moncrief's entrance. And there were microphones. You'd have to get to the microphone and sing. There were no body mics way back then. I'm talking about the late 40s. And Gladys Moncrief was way up at the back, and the curtains opened and she sang off stage without a microphone Whate'er befall, I still recall. And she did the last 8 bars of Love Will Find a Way, and the people started to applaud. I'd never seen her in that, but that must be her theme song. And this middle-aged, overweight woman walked on with a feather fan. And every night I used to watch her. I said, that's what a star looks like. And I'd follow her with my eyes, and she'd come down and she'd sing. The mic was gone. She did the entire act, and the eyes would flash. That middle-aged woman disappeared. She became young, funny, beautiful, and that was my new. That was what I was going to be. I've never got the feather fan yet.
There's still time. Do you remember your first show that you saw?
A Pyjama Game, which Mum and Dad were in. Yeah. I was 18 months old, and I can still remember flashes of it. I remember Ronnie Shand, from Number 96. He was in it, and I remember him winking at me from the stage, because obviously I used to be plonked in the audience on somebody's lap, every few nights. And yes, so there are still images from when I was 18 months old.
You have a wonderful relationship. You've said that Tony is your best friend.
He is. I am so lucky when I look at dysfunctional families and what he was put through by his father and me, that he should even want to talk to me is astonishing. But he's my best friend. We talk in code, the screamer, whatever. We make each other laugh. He's still writing my comedy material. He was writing my comedy material when he was 11, and I couldn't tell anybody when I was doing the clubs.
Precocious little thing, weren't you?
Well, as I said, it was the family business. You got put to work early.
And you said your role as Bernadette, as Priscilla, gives your mother the daughter she never had.
It's true. And, of course, a lot of my performance is everything I've watched my mother do on a stage. So, when you're playing a leading lady in a musical, you just instinctively think, I'm doing Tony Lamond. And of course, the thing is,
I knew you reminded me of something.
Put a blonde wig on me and it's hard to miss, let me tell you. And of course, all my tastes were formulated by my mother and my father, my tastes in music, my tastes in books. So everything that is my life was very much formulated by these two people, especially Mum, who raised me from the age of 11 single-handedly. So, everything I am comes from this lady, and of course I'm very grateful for that.
And you both love working together, don't you?
Oh, yeah. He's my favourite leading man. Yeah. Absolutely. And let me tell you, when we go into a show, he becomes the director, and what he says goes. I haven't pulled a diva, have I? No, never. We naturally, because I have respect for him. Right from those early days of him writing material and saying, I wouldn't do that. That looks, it just doesn't suit you to the. Oh, okay. Never thought to. Shut up, what would you know? Because I realised he did know. He had an eye.
And the other thing is that I know Mum's work so well that if she sort of says, I'll sing that note, and I go, yes, but you can go one higher. And she'll go, and then I'll say, see, doesn't that sound good? So I don't know when I can get away with pushing her that little bit extra, because I know how good she is and what she's capable of.
Well, perhaps I could push you both to sing a few songs for us now.
Oh, I don't know. Could we?
We've done enough shows. We could probably throw something together.
All right.
We'll give it a go.
Over to the piano.
Okay. Some people can get a thrill knitting sweaters and sitting still. That's okay for some people of 105. But at least gotta try. When I think of all the sights that I gotta see at, all the places I gotta play, all the things that I gotta be at. Come on, Papa, what do you say?
Stand well back, I'm coming through. Nothing can stop me now. Watch out, world, I'm warning you. Nothing can stop me now. Now I know that there is a promised land. I'm gonna find it, and how. Hope is high, and I'm gonna cling to it. Tie every string to it. Give everything to it.
I'm ready to move out in front. I've had enough of just passing by life with the rest of them, with the best of them. I can hold my head up high, 'cause I got a goal again. I've got the drive again. I'm gonna feel my heart coming alive again before the parade passes by. Have an egg roll, Mr. Goldstone. Have a napkin, have a chopstick, have a chair. Have a spare rib, Mr. Goldstone. Any spare rib that I can spare, I'm glad to share. Have a fish, have a pork, have a dish, have a fork.
Empty
Put
lot
your
of
feet up,
days.
feel at home.
Always
Have
a chance
smoke,
we'll
have
meet
a Coke.
somebody
Would
to
you like
foot the
to hear a
bill.
joke? I'll
Then
have
the
June
drinks are
reside
on the
home. There's no
Something familiar, something
show
peculiar,
businesslike.
something
No
for
business
everyone
I know.
tonight. Nothing
Everything
with
about
kings,
it is
nothing
appealing.
with crowns. Bring
Everything
on the
the traffic will
lovers, liars and
allow.
clowns.
Nowhere can you get that happy feeling when you are stealing that extra bow. There's no people like show people they smile when they are low. Yesterday they told you you would not go far.
That night you open and there you are.
Next day on your dressing room, they've hung a star. Let's go!
Pantaloons and tunics, funerals and chases, baritones and blazes. On with the show.
That was absolutely wonderful.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much for being on Ovation.
Thank you for having us.
And next time they're handing out the Tonys on Broadway, I hope you'll add another Tony to the family.
Could we cope?
Good thinking, 99.